One thing that would be terrible if we didn't discuss it when we're discussing labor markets is the idea of income distribution and why people earn different wages. And the one that's tested on the AP test is going to be the marginal productivity theory. We're going to be looking at it a little bit, not too much. Hopefully, we get a chance to discuss it in class because it's an interesting idea with a lot of flaws. And we're going to be discussing some of those flaws in this lecture and hopefully more in class. So, the idea of the marginal productivity theory is one that makes sense. It's sort of a kind of obvious reason why people might get paid different amounts. And it's the idea that the division of income amongst your factors of production is determined by your marginal productivity. This makes sense. You get paid more because you do more. It's a basic meritocratic, sure, meritocracy at work here. It's the idea that you do better, you get paid better. It's the American dream, if you will. So, is this necessarily the case? Well, not necessarily. I mean, that's just one aspect of it. Sometimes you have compensating differentials. So this is the idea of you are working in worse circumstances, so you get paid a bit more. It's the idea if you're working the night shift somewhere, you might get paid more because night shifts tend to be more dangerous, and they tend to be the ones that nobody wants to do because nobody wants to be nocturnal. So if you're working at a 24-hour store and you're working overnight, you tend to get paid a bit more if that's sort of your constant gig. Um, Differences in talent. This speaks mostly to the marginal productivity theory. You're better, you get paid more. And the idea of human capital. This is something that also makes sense. You put more time into training, more effort into training, you have more experience, you have more education, you get paid more. You see this in a lot of different jobs. The idea that your human capital gets you paid more money. And all of these kind of fit into the idea of the marginal productivity theory. They all mean that you are more productive in some sense. You can make the argument against compensating differentials, but really it all factors in there. Now, there are other reasons for wage inequality that definitely cannot be explained by the marginal productivity theory. First of all, market power. If you have unions, if you have a unionized job, well, then chances are you're probably going to be able to raise the wage rate above whatever the market is setting it at. Now, if you're in a monopsony, that's great. If you're in perfect competition, it's not always so great. So the strength of the union, the relative strength of the union, is going to help you bargain for higher wages. Efficiency wages are another reason for wage inequality. This is the idea of a firm wanting to pay higher wages in order to incentivize people to stay at their job longer, become more experienced to gain that human capital, um, or just as a general incentive to be more productive. This general idea of I value you, so I will pay you more money than the market says I technically should. That's the idea of an efficiency wage. And lastly, this is not to put it last, but it is sort of the obvious. There is, of course, discrimination in wages, in hiring, and it could be institutional. It could have to do with the idea of not having equal access to education, equal access to certain types of labor markets, certain types of job training, certain things like that. All of, even mass incarceration to some degree can be lumped into this idea of just institutional racism that and discrimination that will lead to people being less able to access the labor market, or it can, of course, lead to individual. Anytime that you control for all of these things, which economists are able to do, they control for all of these things and they find a wage differential. There's an obvious discrimination going on, whether it be overt bias or um, or something a little bit under the cover. So this absolutely happens. You'll frequently hear people talk about how much women get paid regarding with regard to men, and that they get paid less. Now, normally those numbers are a bit inflated, but even once you correct for those, things such as childbirth and things like that, things that um, many people would even argue are institutionalized issues within the labor market there. Even if you correct for all that stuff, you still have a differential between what women get paid and what men get paid. Now, like I said, it's not as big as many people claim, but it's still there. And that still tells you that there is some level of discrimination going on, um, looking at paying women versus men in the workforce. So, is the marginal productivity theory really true? The answer is sometimes, but not always. I mean, there's a lot more going on there. And one of the biggest areas of study in economics today is actually trying to figure out why there is such large differences in pay between different people. And this isn't always, as we were talking about on the last slide, this isn't always about race or gender or religion or any of that stuff. Sometimes it's just about class. Why is somebody who is raised in a poorer neighborhood, uh, whether they be a white straight man a or somebody who is more marginalized, why are they, just based on their class, going to be paid less for the same work as somebody who is from a more privileged class? Well, that's something that can be that is currently being studied, and frankly, we don't really have an answer for that yet. Um, but that's one. The marginal productivity theory is just one of the theories, one of the ideas as to why there is an income disparity and income inequality. Now, remember, this is income. This is what people are getting paid, not wealth. That is a different thing and a different issue entirely, which we can talk about in another lecture.